A teenage boy with zero flight training suddenly found himself alone at the controls of a plummeting private jet 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. The pilot had collapsed. The engine was failing. And he had less than 3 minutes to figure out how to fly a machine he had never touched before or die with everyone on board. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Marcus Chen was 17 years old when he boarded that private jet on a Tuesday morning in San Diego. He was not supposed to be on that flight at all. His father owned a small aviation company that chartered flights for business executives, and Marcus had begged to skip school and tag along on this particular trip. His father finally agreed, but only because the flight was supposed to be routine. 3 passengers, 1 pilot, a quick hop up the California coast to San Francisco. Nothing special, nothing dangerous. Marcus settled into his seat near the back of the small cabin and pulled out his phone. He had been obsessed with flight simulator games since he was 12. Hundreds of hours spent in his bedroom flying virtual planes through virtual skies. His friends thought it was boring, but Marcus loved the precision of it. The way every switch and button had a purpose. The way you had to think 3 steps ahead. But he had never been inside a real cockpit. Never touched real controls. His father had promised that one day he would teach him to fly, but that day had not come yet. So Marcus sat in the passenger section and watched the coastline disappear beneath them as they climbed into the morning sky. The pilot's name was Ray Mitchell, 52 years old, 25 years of flying experience. He had flown cargo planes, passenger jets, and private charters. He knew the California coast like the back of his hand. Marcus had met him a few times before, and Ray always seemed calm and professional. The kind of person you would trust with your life without even thinking about it. 20 minutes into the flight, Ray turned around and gave Marcus a thumbs up through the open cockpit door. Everything was smooth. The weather was perfect. They would be landing in San Francisco in less than an hour. Marcus nodded back and returned to his phone. But then something changed. Marcus heard a strange sound from the cockpit, a kind of choking gasp. He looked up just in time to see Ray slump forward in his seat. His head hit the control panel with a dull thud. The plane lurched to the left. One of the passengers screamed. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and rushed toward the cockpit. His heart was hammering in his chest. Ray was unconscious. His face was gray and his breathing was shallow and irregular. Marcus shook his shoulder, but there was no response. One of the passengers, a middle-aged woman named Claire, pushed past Marcus and checked Ray's pulse. She was a nurse. She immediately started trying to revive him, but it was clear that Ray was in serious trouble. A heart attack maybe, or a stroke. Whatever it was, he was not waking up. The plane continued to veer left. The nose was starting to dip. They were losing altitude. Claire looked at Marcus with wide eyes and said someone had to fly the plane. The other 2 passengers were frozen in their seats, paralyzed by fear. Marcus stared at the cockpit, at the hundreds of switches and dials and screens, at the control yoke that Ray's limp hand was still resting on. He had spent countless hours in simulators, but this was real. The air was thinner up here. The plane was heavier than anything he had ever virtually flown. And if he made a mistake, they would all die. But there was no choice. Marcus stepped into the cockpit and sat down in the co-pilot seat. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the controls. The first thing he noticed was the altitude indicator. They were at 28,000 feet and dropping fast. The engine was still running, but something was wrong with the trim. The plane wanted to roll left and dive. Marcus grabbed the yoke with both hands and pulled back gently. Too much and he could stall the plane. Too little and they would nosedive into the ocean. He had learned this in the simulator, but knowing it and doing it were 2 completely different things. The yoke felt stiff and unresponsive. He pulled harder and the nose started to lift. The altimeter slowed its descent. 27,000 feet. 26,000. He was losing altitude, but at least he had stopped the dive. Claire was still working on Ray, but she kept glancing back at Marcus. She could see the terror in his eyes. Marcus forced himself to focus. He scanned the instrument panel, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Airspeed, altitude, heading, fuel. He recognized most of the gauges from his simulator, but everything was happening so fast. His brain was screaming at him to panic, but he pushed the fear down and tried to think logically. He needed to stabilize the plane first. Then he needed to call for help. The radio. He reached for the headset hanging next to the pilot's seat and put it on. His voice cracked when he pressed the transmit button. He said Mayday 3 times and explained the situation. The pilot was unconscious. A teenager was flying the plane. They needed help immediately. There was a long pause, and then a voice came through the headset, calm and steady. It was an air traffic controller from Los Angeles Center. Her name was Diana, and she told Marcus to take a deep breath. She said she was going to help him. She asked for his position, and Marcus read off the coordinates from the GPS display. They were about 60 miles off the coast of Big Sur, over open water. Diana told him he was doing great. She said she was going to talk him through this step by step. First thing, she needed him to check the autopilot. Marcus scanned the panel and found the autopilot controls. He tried to engage it, but nothing happened. The system was offline. Maybe Ray had disengaged it when he collapsed. Maybe it had malfunctioned. Either way, Marcus was going to have to fly this plane manually. Diana stayed on the radio with him. She told him to keep the wings level and maintain his current heading. She said another plane was being diverted to fly alongside him. An experienced pilot who could guide him visually. But that would take time. For now, it was just Marcus and Diana, and a machine he barely understood. The passengers were silent behind him. Marcus could feel their eyes on his back. He could feel the weight of their lives in his hands. The plane shuddered as they hit a pocket of turbulence. Marcus's stomach dropped, but he kept his grip on the yoke steady. Diana told him to adjust his altitude to 24,000 feet. She walked him through how to use the throttle and the trim controls. It was like playing the simulator, but with real consequences. Every input mattered. Every mistake could be fatal. Marcus's mind was racing, but his hands were starting to steady. The plane leveled out at 24,000 feet. He was flying, actually flying. The California coast was visible in the distance, a thin brown line against the blue of the ocean. Diana told him he was doing an amazing job. She said the escort plane would reach him in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, she needed him to stay calm and keep the plane straight and level. But then the engine coughed, a loud sputtering sound that made Marcus's blood run cold. The RPM gauge dropped. The plane lurched forward as it lost power. Diana asked what was happening, and Marcus told her the engine was failing. She told him to check the fuel levels. Marcus scanned the gauges and his heart sank. The fuel was low, critically low. How had Ray not noticed? Maybe he had been feeling sick before the heart attack and had not been paying attention. Or maybe there was a leak. Either way, they were running out of fuel fast. Diana's voice remained calm, but Marcus could hear the urgency in it now. She said they needed to get the plane on the ground as soon as possible. She was coordinating with other controllers to find the nearest airport. But they were still over water. The closest runway was at least 20 minutes away, and the engine was dying. Marcus could feel the plane losing speed. The nose wanted to drop again. He pushed the throttle forward, but there was no response. The engine was running on fumes. Diana came back on the radio and told him there was a small regional airport near Monterey. It was their best option. She gave him a new heading, and Marcus turned the plane toward the coast. But he knew they were not going to make it. The math did not add up. They were too far out and the fuel was almost gone. The engine died completely. The cockpit went eerily quiet except for the rush of wind over the wings. They were gliding now, a 30,000-pound piece of metal falling through the sky with nothing but momentum and gravity. Marcus felt a wave of panic crash over him, but Diana's voice cut through it. She told him to keep the nose up and maintain his glide speed. She said he could still land this plane. She had seen pilots glide for miles and make safe landings, but Marcus had never landed anything. Not even in the simulator. He had always been too focused on the flying part. Landing seemed too hard, too technical. And now he was supposed to land a dead plane with no power and no experience. The escort plane appeared off his right wing. A small twin-engine aircraft with an experienced pilot named Tom. Tom's voice came through the headset. He said he was going to fly alongside Marcus and help guide him in. He told Marcus he was doing an incredible job. But Tom also confirmed what Marcus already knew. They were not going to make it to the airport. They were losing altitude too fast. Tom said there was only one option. They had to ditch in the ocean. Marcus's mouth went dry. Ditching meant controlled crash landing in the water. It meant trying to keep the plane level and the nose up so they did not cartwheel and break apart on impact. It meant hoping the fuselage stayed intact long enough for everyone to evacuate. It meant 1,000 things could go wrong. But it was their only chance. Tom walked Marcus through the process. He told him to aim for a flat section of water away from any waves. He said to keep the wings level and touch down with the tail first. He said to brace for impact and get everyone out as fast as possible. The plane had emergency rafts. If they survived the landing, they had a chance. Marcus relayed the plan to Claire and the passengers. Their faces were pale, but they nodded. They trusted him. They had no choice but to trust him. Marcus lined up the plane with the water. They were at 3,000 feet, then 2,000, then 1,000. The ocean was rushing up to meet them. Marcus could see the waves now. The whitecaps, the endless blue. His hands were locked on the yoke. His eyes were locked on the horizon. Tom was still talking in his ear, giving him instructions, telling him when to flare, when to pull back. 500 feet, 300, 200. Marcus pulled back on the yoke and felt the nose lift. The tail touched the water first with a violent jolt that threw everyone forward. Then the fuselage slammed down and the world exploded in noise and spray and chaos. The plane skipped once, twice, then plowed into the water and started to sink. Water poured in through the seams and cracks. Marcus unbuckled and helped Claire pull Ray out of his seat. The passengers were already inflating the emergency raft. Marcus pushed Ray toward the exit and climbed out onto the wing. The plane was tilting nose down into the water. They had maybe 30 seconds before it went under completely. Everyone piled into the raft. Marcus was the last one out. He jumped into the raft just as the plane's tail lifted into the air, and the whole aircraft slid beneath the surface. They floated there in stunned silence, watching the spot where the plane had disappeared. Then Claire started laughing. A wild, hysterical laugh that turned into tears. One of the passengers joined in, then another. Marcus just sat there shaking, staring at his hands. He had done it. He had actually done it. The Coast Guard arrived 20 minutes later. They pulled everyone out of the raft and onto the helicopter. Ray was rushed to the hospital. He survived. A major heart attack, but he survived. And so did everyone else. Because a 17-year-old kid who had never flown a real plane managed to land one in the middle of the ocean. The story made national news. Marcus became a reluctant hero. People called him brave, a natural pilot, a miracle. But Marcus did not feel like any of those things. He felt lucky. Lucky that Diana had been on the radio. Lucky that Tom had been nearby. Lucky that the plane had held together just long enough. He went back to school and tried to return to normal life, but everything felt different now. He had looked death in the face and somehow walked away. His father hugged him for a long time the night after the crash and told him he was proud. But he also made Marcus promise to finish school before he even thought about getting a pilot's license. Marcus agreed. But he also knew something had changed inside him. He had discovered something about himself in that cockpit. Something about staying calm when everything is falling apart. About trusting yourself even when you have no idea what you are doing. About the thin line between panic and focus. Ray recovered and eventually returned to flying. He and Marcus stayed in touch. Ray told him that what he did that day was not just about the simulator training. It was about the ability to think clearly under pressure, to make decisions when there was no time to second guess, to act when everyone else was frozen. Those were not things you could learn from a game. Marcus graduated high school and enrolled in flight school. He earned his pilot's license 2 years later. Today he flies commercial jets, and every time he sits in a cockpit, he thinks about that day over the Pacific, about the moment when everything hung in the balance, about the choice between giving up and trying anyway. He thinks about the people who trusted him when he did not trust himself. And he remembers that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when ordinary people refuse to let fear win. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this.